Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Community Platform on USUI TV. Some of us are born into a Muslim family. Some of us find Islam and faith. One such person is a sister, Sister Batool Al Toma. I'll tell you something about her present work that she's doing, and I hope that she will tell us how did she come to Islam, what were the challenges, and how did she successfully overcome some of those challenges. Sister Batool is the founder and director of Convert Muslim Foundation. In her role as the director of the New Muslims Project at the Islamic Foundation in Markfield, Leicester, which is of course is also a center for higher education, she established a UK-based services related to the support, education and counselling of new converts and new Muslims in Britain. She is the editor of The Meeting Point, a magazine that has come to be recognised nationally as unique to the convert community. Over the years, she's devised a number of education and training programs which have been delivered in UK and in Europe, and has acted as a media consultant on aspects of Islam and family life and conversion to Islam in UK and beyond. Sister Batool was a member of Cambridge Theology Board and in symposiums relating to contextualizing Islam in Britain, and was the principal lead on the narratives of conversion to Islam in Britain, the female perspective. She has produced and co-produced a number of reports on a range of topics relating to conversion to Islam in UK. She's a qualified family and child-centered mediator and has 4 children, mashallah, and 4 grandchildren. And Sister Batool enjoys walks in nature. That's quite a lot of stuff to get in. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Batool.
Wa alaikum assalam. How are you, Anjum?
Ramadan Kareem to you. A bit late in the day, sister, but Ramadan Kareem to you.
No, not at all, not at all. These are the loveliest of days in Ramadan, the last 10 days and nights, and inshallah there's so many blessings to be found in these days and nights. So it's probably the nicest time. I'm sure though some of your listeners must be totally fed up and thinking to themselves, oh my God, not her again.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. We are delighted to have you.
She's been on the circuit for years, that woman.
No, not at all. We're absolutely delighted. We are quite honored actually to have you, and thank you so much for giving up your valuable time. We know how busy you are. Sister Batool, it would be lovely if you could tell us some of your earlier life and the journey that you took. How did you come to Islam? What was that trigger that you thought, I think I'm going to be a Muslim?
Right. Well, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to join you this evening, Anjum, and your listeners. And inshallah, I hope they're all enjoying Ramadan and are looking forward to breaking their fast in another hour or two, inshallah. Okay, so you're taking me right back to my sort of early 20s. Well, actually, even earlier than that, to my middle teens. During which time we had a difficult situation in our family when my father had a stroke. Well, he had a heart attack first, and then about a week later he had a very bad stroke. And we were told that he probably wouldn't survive it. There were 10 in the family, 10 children, 6 girls and 4 boys. I was the first of the 6 girls after 3 boys who were older than me. So my dad had a stroke, and we were farmers in Ireland, not big farmers, but sort of moderately sort of normal kind of farmers. And obviously, if my father passed away, my mum was going to be left with 10 children and not a lot of support. Because it was back in the 70s, and we didn't have the welfare state that, is there now. So it would have been really, really difficult for her. Anyway, alhamdulillah, he was very ill, and I was sleeping in the same room with my mum at the time because she asked me to come and stay with her at night. And I remembered waking up in the middle of the night, or waking up at various times during the night, and my mum would be praying. She was a very conscious believer, and so was my dad. Lord have mercy on both of them. They were really good people, and very conscious in the sense that they were determined to bring us up as a family of people who were a family of faith and who attended church and attended mass and whatever it was we needed to do. And she was always praying at night when I would wake up. And in my, sort of very early teenage years, I remember waking up and I used to hear her praying her rosary. And I was so afraid and terrified by what might happen. I remember saying, "Oh God, please, if my dad survives and if you let him live, I will become a nun. I will join a religious order and I will become a nun." And then, as a young teenager, I put all of these things aside when my father actually recovered and came home. He wasn't in the best of health. Obviously, as I'm sure you and all your listeners will realize, when you have a stroke, there are consequences. And so he was well, but he wasn't able to work like he did before. And it took a long time. It was going to take a long time for him to really recover and to get to be able to use his hands and to be able to walk and so on like he had before. So I was sent to boarding school then to see if boarding school would actually put some manners on me and kind of wear the sort of mad edges off me, and I would settle down and become sensible, which didn't really happen. It was a waste of time. But anyway, when I was in boarding school, and as I was, going through boarding school, we used to have RE and religious education class. And of course, it was always about Catholicism, Christianity, because in Ireland, we didn't have other religions, really. It was a very insular country at that time, and we had very little to go on except our Catholicism. And I was always, even though I attended church and I loved going to mass and I loved being a religious person and thinking, really understanding the impact that faith had on my life in terms of how it impacted on my worldview and so on. So I was religiously oriented, but then I started to get a little bit uneasy about the Trinity and about the person of Christ and about God made man and about all sorts of things theological. And I began to ask what I felt were serious questions in the classroom, but generally speaking, everybody else thought I was just sick and probably being stupid and probably hard to sort of waste time, or I don't know, maybe I don't know what people thought, but I became a bit of a laughing stock, and I became a bit of a person that was looked on as disruptive rather than the fact that I wanted to ask questions, because I think people didn't really know how to respond and how to answer those questions, even as priests and nuns. I was challenging something that they themselves had never been challenged about before, perhaps not.
So, Sister sorry, Sister Batool. So you were actually asking some very difficult questions.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. And I was causing sort of disruption and rumbles of discontent and so on. But anyway, I just sort of decided, okay, fine, let's leave it. And then I left as I was leaving school, I remembered this promise that I made. And of course, you know, it was a promise to leave school and go straight into a religious order, which was the order that where I was boarding at school. I began to get worried and afraid about it. And then I asked a few people, and they were saying to me, oh, God, you know, for goodness sake, you were only a child. You know, you wanted your dad to live. It was a really difficult time in your life. So you were making promises that really, as a child, you couldn't foresee, or you couldn't see the future as to how things were going to turn out and how you'd feel and this and that. And then I asked my mum, and my mum said to me, look, you know, I know, you know, how you feel, and I know that you want to honor that promise, but you don't know anything about life. So why don't you just go out and work and whatever? And if you still feel the same, then by all means, come back and join. But if you don't, then there's no harm in it, because you were only a child. And Daddy got better, and we're all very grateful, and we've all thanked God every day for giving him back to us. And I don't think God is going to punish us or punish you for not for reneging on this promise. So anyway, I went out to work, and then I was in Dublin working for a few years, and I used to go home every weekend, go to mass, go to the choir, go do all the things that my parents wanted me to do and brought me up to do. And then I was still having these doubts, and still, you know, things just weren't sitting comfortable with me. And I just couldn't put things to rest. I was still sort of asking these questions in the back of my head. And then I began to sort of feel that I wasn't entirely satisfied when I went to Mass. I wasn't entirely satisfied with how I felt after being there, the sermon, the service itself, what it meant to me, and so on. Anyway, I happened to meet Malaysian students in Dublin. And they were Muslims, obviously, and they were attending the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, and some of them were attending Dublin Airport, Aer Lingus, and they were doing aircraft and engineering out there. So I met these people purely on a social basis, and then they asked me to visit them and come, you know, and sort of, so there was this socialization that started taking place between me and them. And then I began to notice their attitudes and behavior and so on and so forth. And they weren't doing dawah, they weren't doing anything to kind of tell me about Islam or turn me into a Muslim or anything like that. It was purely from observation and how they interacted with each other, how they dealt with each other, the respect they had for each other, the respect they had for their parents, for their studying, for people generally, and so on. And I began to become really impressed by them. And then I began to ask, and they said to me about Islam. I'd never heard of Islam in my entire life. I was probably in my early 20s at this stage.
Okay,
never heard of it.
Sister Batool, I'm so sorry. We're going to take a very short break. I'm so sorry. I could listen to you all day, and I'm sure that the audience can. But we're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to take you back, if that's okay with you. Thank you so much. Join me back within the next few minutes. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Community Platform. Just before break, we were talking to Sister Batool. It's absolutely fascinating about her journey. She wanted to become a nun. Faith played a pivotal role in her life then and now. But she was also asking some very difficult questions. And when people ask difficult questions, sometimes the audience can become very uncomfortable. Sister Batool?
Yes, I'm here.
I think during the break I asked you a question. At any point did you wanted to become, a nun and say, look, this is what I wanted to be?
Yes, I really did feel that religion was my calling. And I did see, and of course, in Ireland, because we were Catholics and because of the Christian community, if there was a nun or a priest in the family, it meant that literally everyone in the family had a ticket straight into heaven. So, there was a very strong emphasis on religious life. And I had spent 5 years in the convent as a boarding student. And I heard the nuns chanting in the evenings, in the mornings, the prayers and the Gregorian chants that they made. And I loved it. I really did love it. I felt very close to God and I felt a real strong connection. But then again, I was having these doubts, and then I left and I went to Dublin. And of course, I just mentioned I'd met the Malaysian students.
Yes.
And then suddenly I became so interested in this religion that I'd never heard of before. And the more I read about it, the more it literally, just was like a round peg going right into the round hole. I knew straight away that this was exactly what I wanted. And so I began to attend the mosque, and we didn't have mosques in Dublin at the time. We just had a kind of a house in Dublin. And I began to attend on a Friday night and listen and hear. And then after a few years, I made my Shahada and bought a one-way ticket, really. And then after I'd made my Shahada, of course, everybody knew that I'd become a Muslim. And so I became hot news because, everybody was thinking about, we've got to find somebody for her to marry. And this is just the most awful time for a new Muslim, because everybody's just wheeled in, and there's this guy and there's this one and this one and that one and everyone. And you become so... it becomes a really anxious time because obviously, you've done something that's been really totally against your norms and, upbringing, not your values, because they were the upbringing values that my parents had instilled in me, and Islam just basically took them and polished them and honed them and made them much brighter and, mashallah, stronger and so on. But so eventually, after about 3 years, I was introduced to somebody for marriage. It was the most frightening weekend in my entire life. But I met this person. I told you I'd drop in a clanger. So I met this person on a Friday evening. He was Iraqi. He had come from the UK to visit friends in Dublin. So I met him on a Friday evening. We met again on Saturday for about an hour. We met again on Sunday morning, and we got married on Sunday afternoon.
Alhamdulillah. That's marvelous. Absolutely marvelous.
I'm not sure about that, Anjum. Alhamdulillah, yes, I was very lucky in that he was a really good person. But I wonder how I'd feel if one of my children came home and said to me, look, Mum.
Yes, that's a challenge, isn't it? You've just reminded, did you at any point meet Muslims who were much more culturally orientated? Because whilst you were talking, I suddenly thought of Sheikh Hakim Murad from Cambridge. And he said something, I don't know whether he spoke somewhere where I've heard it or whether he's written a book that I read, that when he became a Muslim, he would go to a mosque and there would be people who would come and put a topi on his head because, there were times when he would wear a topi and there were times when he would not wear a topi. So there were lots of Muslims who were it was almost as if they were pulling, this is the way that you do it and this is not the way that you do it. Did you go through those challenges?
Well, I did kind of, but I really enjoyed that because I came through to Islam through the Malaysian community. Okay. And, if it was the Pakistani community, I would have worn probably a shalwar kameez with great pride. Yes. And it was the Malaysian community, I wore a baju kurung with great pride. And, the Malaysians, mashallah, they were really lovely people, very gentle people, very friendly, very nice people. And even though they had their very strong cultural attachments, they were attached to the Royal College of Surgeons, and they were very well educated Islamically. Mm-hmm. So I never felt like I was being brainwashed into some kind of cultural Islam or cultural expression of Islam. Because in Dublin we had people from all over the world, from the Middle East, from the Far East, from South Asia, everywhere, all studying in different educational facilities, Trinity College, UCD, Royal College of Surgeons, Aer Lingus, all of these things. And so there was this wonderful mix of people, and, they were all working together to bring about Islam in Dublin that was easy and livable and enjoyable in a sense. We were always getting together. We were always having barbecues. We were always playing squash and all sorts of tennis and so on. And so it was lovely. It was a really, it was one of the best times of my life, really. And actually, I had an email from a lady who saw a video of me talking about this time. I had an email from her there yesterday. I haven't seen her or spoken to her in 40 years. And she was one of the people in Dublin at the time. And she said, how wonderful it was to be in touch again and so on. So, so it was a really wonderful time. I think, yes, converts to Islam, we do go through some difficult times. But, I'm at the stage now where I'm really looking at talking about the positives rather than the negatives. And I think we have to see, and I would love the Muslim community to see, converts to Islam as an asset to the community, as an asset to society here in Britain as a whole, rather than a negative, rather than, a help rather than a hindrance, or look at the good sides of all these things rather than the difficulties.
Sister Batool, what was the most difficult challenge that you think that you faced moving from, I'm assuming that it was a Christian faith in Dublin to an Islamic faith? What was the most difficult challenge that you faced?
Because I was brought up in a really good practicing Catholic family, I didn't really feel the move from Catholicism to Islam so badly. I really didn't. Because we prayed a lot. You have the Angelus at 12 o'clock in the daytime, at 6 o'clock in the evening. That's twice. Then we were taught as children to pray in the morning as soon as we woke up and before we went to school. We prayed the rosary at night, all the family together in the kitchen. We prayed it all together at night. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4. So, I mean, there was just one more to add on,
Yes. Well,
and really, when we had Lent, my mum always made sure that we gave up something that we really loved for Lenten period. So there was a little bit of fasting there. Once a week we would fast on Fridays. So there were lots of things that were very, very similar to Islam. I think the biggest problem and the biggest challenge for me, Anjum, was the sadness and the trauma I caused my parents.
Yes, absolutely.
That was
absolutely.
Yeah, and they were heartbroken. And I say to converts to Islam now, when they say to me, "Oh, my parents are upset, and my family are upset," I always say to them, I would be upset if your parents weren't upset.
Yes. Yes.
Because they are your parents. It's their prerogative to be upset.
You've highlighted.
You know, you've probably chosen to do something that they know very little about. And they're scared because, let's face it, you know, Muslims around the world haven't the greatest, you know, of image at the moment.
Yes. I think you've highlighted something very important there. Do you, I know that you've been involved with interfaith and interfaith initiatives. Do you believe that interfaith helps people to come to terms with the other, with the stranger? Do you think, or has interfaith become just another, you know, a samosa and cucumber sandwich once a month, and everybody's very nice to each other, and then we go back to being who we are? Do you think interfaith has lost something, or is it something which is, does it really work?
Well, you know, the jury is out on that one, Anjum, really, to be honest. I mean, I have been involved in interfaith work, but you know, I really would like the Muslim community to really focus on intra-faith. You know, the way that mosques and communities are divided along sectarian lines.
Yes.
The way the communities are split apart, you know, based on you know what part of the Pakistan they came from and what side of the river they came from and what, you know, what clan or tribe or sect or whatever it is they owe allegiance to, or what scholar they owe allegiance to, or whatever. I feel, you know, I it's nice that we have interfaith work, but you know, we're in there talking to people of different faiths about Islam, and yet the way we practice Islam and the way we, you know, the cultural expressions of Islam that are really hard to navigate, and the difference between the theory and the practice as converts come to realize is massive. And I think, you know, I would love to see the Muslim community focusing a little more on how we as Muslims present ourselves and our ambassadors to the world, rather than trying to just pick a few nice little, you know, soft bits and sharing them with people of different faiths. Absolutely. And then again, I also feel that, you know, as people of different faiths, you know, we have to, you know, we have to support each other in the problems that we're facing around the world.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel that, you know, these problems, particularly issues around Palestine and so on, are just, you know, we're not speaking about them, and we're not, you know, there isn't the condemnation there from people of all faiths.
Yes,
in relation
absolutely.
To things like this.
And
so I'm the jury is out on the interfaith work, to be honest. Yeah.
Absolutely. You really hit it on the head, actually. I just sometimes wonder whether we need more, you know, estrogen-driven women in this field to actually make those statements, to say, yes, we need difficult conversations. And unless we have those difficult conversations, because when I keep going back, you know, talking about samosas and cucumber sandwiches and meeting once a month and everybody being nice to each other, we can't seem to move forward. And I find a lot of interfaith organizations get stuck being nice.
Yeah. Well, in Leicester, I mean, you know, when I was part of the interfaith group here, and I still sort of interact with it now and then, I mean, as a woman, as a Muslim woman, you know, and we would have our interfaith meetings in St. Philip's Church, which is just across the road from Omar Mosque. And when the Adhan went, I, as a woman, couldn't go to Omar Mosque to pray, but I was given a space to pray in St. Philip's Church. Now, I mean, that is just bizarre.
Yes.
It's just a total contradiction of everything we stand for.
Yeah.
And I mean, now, you know, lots of our community are talking about the fact that, oh, you know, the mosques are closed and we can't go to them during Ramadan. There are women who have never been in a mosque in this country because they're not allowed into a mosque.
Absolutely.
So for the men who are lamenting the fact that the mosques are closed and they can't get in, I would say, have a look at your women and see how you have engineered their extraction from the mosque all these years.
Absolutely.
You have physically, spiritually, and architecturally built them out of the mosque.
I think we need quite a few Sister Batools, to be very honest. I think there's only one Batool Al Toma, and I think we need quite a few. You know, as I said to you earlier, Sister Batool, I could listen to you all day. I'm afraid that's not possible or feasible, but I hope that one day that we will get you here in the studios live and have a really a good conversation.
Inshallah.
I'm very grateful to you, Sister, for taking the time out and being with us. Thank you so much. And if I, on behalf of UCTV, I hope that you have a wonderful last few days of Ramadan Kareem and a wonderful, wonderful Eid.
Inshallah.
It's very.
Thank you so much, Anjum.
No, it's an honor and pleasure, and I'll be in touch. Thank you. Jazakallah khair, Sister. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa jazakallahu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. She's someone that I met quite a few years ago. In fact, I think I met her at Markfield Foundation, where we were doing some studies. But she was absolutely right. We need those difficult conversations. As I said earlier, that some of us are born into faith, some find faith, and we are the lucky ones. I'm really grateful to you for allowing us to come into your homes uninvited. Thank you for watching. Remain safe. Be safe from COVID-19, of course. Stay home, stay safe, and save lives. Look after your neighbor, whoever they may be, and join me again next week. Oh, by the way, of course, we still have a few days for Ramadan, but may I take this opportunity to wish all the viewers a very, very happy Eid. As I said, remain safe. Jazakallah khair. See you next week. Assalamu alaikum.